I understand when somebody says I can't be emotional in the workplace, but that also tells me that we need to do better at talking about emotions in a better, more effective way.
Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, and as always, I am very grateful to be with you here today. And I am super excited about our topic, but more excited about our guest. So, let me tell you a little story. I live on LinkedIn. Y'all know by now I live on LinkedIn. And I was scrolling and perusing on LinkedIn, and I came across this creator who was talking about emotional intelligence, but something really stuck out to me. This creator was a man. Now, it's not that there are not emotionally intelligent men out there. We know that there are, but like to hear a man, and for me, especially a brother, talking about emotional intelligence, spreading the transformation of emotional intelligence. And y'all know this is my jam. Y'all know this is something I love to talk about. I was like immediately drawn. So, of course, I was like, the algorithm took care of me that day. I reached out. I was like, hey, I would love for you to be on my podcast. And he was like, absolutely. So we had an amazing conversation the first time we talked, and we're talking about this idea that emotions don't belong in the workplace, especially if you're a man. So we're dismantling this space of emotional toxicity with my guest today. His name is Jarrod Jones. He is the founder, lead trainer, and architect of the Centered Experience, and he helps men recognize, recalibrate, and recover from emotional overload, translating complex emotional and nervous system dynamics into simple and practical tools they can use in real time to recover themselves. Now, see, if you are listening to this description and you listen to this podcast, you know this is a kindred spirit right here. So I am so excited to have this conversation today. Welcome to the show, Jarrod. How are you?
Yeah. First off, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So I'm like really excited about this conversation for real. And so, I like for my listeners to really get to know the guests beneath the title. And so I would love for you to just share a little bit about who you are, share what you do as well, like how you came to this work, because I think it's extremely interesting to our listeners to learn this bit.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. And getting into this field, I don't think I chose the field. I think the field chose me.
Mhm.
And it's years now. Looking back, I was like, man, it's been over 20 years. No, it's been 25 years. I've been in the field. And early on, what I realized is that I was working with a lot of men and boys at the time that looked like me. Right. And so as in my journey through just working through the field, I started realizing that I'm not just helping them, I'm also helping myself. And I'm starting to find out what's going on with me. And so I guess 25 years into it, right now, I'm starting to realize that there's a lot of men who have been taught certain things, especially when it comes to emotions and how to suppress them. And what I've started to realize is that you don't really suppress emotions
That's right.
because they still live in your body. They still live there. And so what I started to realize is that there's a lot of men in the field, me included, who understood things intellectually, right? We could grasp it because we're very logical. But then when it comes to the emotion side, it's like we just push that away. It's almost like we bought into the idea that, women are emotional and men are logical. And so as I started to understand myself more, I started to realize, hold up, I'm an emotional being.
That's right.
So I started to realize, like, in order for me to buy into what the culture has said about men, I have to leave a part of me. And that was, for me, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Mm, yeah,
hold
that's
on.
deep.
And so my journey has been helping men to become their fullest self. And a lot of that is breaking these stereotypes, quite frankly, right? Because there's a lot of men who just feel like we're not emotional, we're not supposed to be emotional. And I'm like, I don't, first off, I don't think we talk about emotions in a effective
Yes,
way.
that's right.
And especially for men to understand it. So once we start to understand what emotions are, then it starts to be more palatable for men to sit back and say, oh, okay, I get that. I get that. So
Yes. I love that. There were so many things that you said. Man, okay, so the first thing, there's so many places I can go with this because my brain's like firing all syllables. So
right.
the first are cylinders, not syllables. My mom brain kicked in. So the first thing you said is like, hey, I'm an emotional being. And it's interesting because back in the day, I used to do like coaching around entrepreneurship with other physicians and clinicians. And I talked a lot about sales. And what they teach us in sales is that people don't make logical decisions, they make emotional decisions. So, in the world of marketing and sales, they talk about emotions all the time in decision making.
Right.
But then when you bring it to like humanity and the way we experience each other, our colleagues, our children, then it's, oh, wait, though. We can only experience emotion in a certain context, but we're not really emotional beings, especially if you're a man. And men will have other men think that, and women, by the way,
Mhm.
that decision making is not emotional, that it's not supposed to be, that it's supposed to be logical. So it's just so, I love what you said, like, we are emotional beings. And the way emotions is talked about is ineffective. Ah, that's like gold.
Well, think about the frame you just even put it in, right? If you're talking about emotions as a sales technique, it almost becomes manipulation. And so, from a man's standpoint, one of the things men do not want to be perceived as is weak. So, if you're going to say, okay, I can use your emotions as a manipulation technique, then what the man is saying is, oh, emotions is a sign of weakness.
Ooh,
And so, I don't want anybody to be able to manipulate me. So yeah, I can use it in a on a sales call or something like that. But when it comes to myself, I'm putting it aside because I don't want anybody to be able to manipulate me, and they're going to use my emotions to do that. So I'm not an emotional person. All the while, you're still in. Look, whether you believe you are or not, you are. you're an emotion.
right.
You're an emotional person. Uh,
Yeah.
that's one of the things you don't have a choice in, and it's interesting because when you start talking to men, they really know that. They just don't want to articulate it because, again, it feels like weakness. But they know a few, they articulate a few emotions, anger, right? Uh,
Yes. Yes.
you'll be hard pressed to find a man who will admit that he's in fear or that, sadness, but they know that those emotions exist, but they won't claim them. They'll claim anger a lot.
And it's interesting because, and I imagine I would love your perspective on this. It seems to me that they would claim anger because that's an emotion that seemingly is an emotion of power. Whereas sadness or fear or hurt is an emotion of weakness, quote unquote. So if y'all are just listening, I'm putting my air quotes up here, right? An emotion of weakness.
Exactly.
And I wonder about happiness, though. I wonder about like the articulation of happiness because I would imagine that it could be split, right? There could be like excitement and happiness, and those could also might be seen as something that can be manipulated. What do you think about that?
I find that a lot of men have a hard time identifying what happiness is. Even when I talk to them, like the first thing I get from most men when I talk to them is what makes them happy, but not being able to identify what happiness is. And so they'll talk about different things. Well, that doesn't make me happy. That doesn't make me happy. But then when it's like, okay, well, what is that thing that it doesn't do or does do? It's like there's no articulation there to be able to say, okay, this is what happiness is for me. Like this is what happiness is. And when it comes to anger, it's not just that anger is almost like it makes them feel strong. It's not just that, it's familiar. And so since it's familiar, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I know, my dad used to get angry. My grandfather used to get angry. So anger is okay. And yes, it does. Sometimes it does boost that adrenaline. It does make me feel something, but anger is okay. But all these other things is like, I don't even know. Happiness. What is that? What is happiness?
Yeah. And if we think about it, I was just thinking, it's brought to mind, like if we think historically speaking, when like I'm talking historically speaking, like in the days of enslavement, feeling happy, feeling fear, feeling sadness or hurt, those are emotions that could get you X'd, right? And so that level of suppression evolved out of necessity.
Yes.
And I think it evolved differently for women, but like emotional suppression also happens in women. It just happens differently. And then as we've evolved into the workspace, especially as we've evolved into the workspace that are male dominated, then it's been sort of a similar emotional suppression, but it looks different and it interpreted different for women and especially Black women. And so it's a response that's evolved out of necessity that has now become a little outdated for what is needed in relationships, in workspaces, and leadership.
The sad thing is that you can teach a trauma response without the person even experiencing the trauma. And that's one of the things that we've done. I noticed this with my boys. And I remember first person that pulled a gun out on me was a police officer. Okay. And so whenever I come in contact with police officers, especially around the time of like Trayvon Martin's and all of that, right?
Mhm.
I remember having this response to police officers and then watching my boys. And then while they didn't have the same situation happen to them, I started watching them have the same response to police officers. It's like
Mm.
trauma, but I taught them the response. And so to your point, when it goes, going back to slavery and all of that trauma, that the responses to that trauma had been passed down. It's one of the reasons why men don't cry.
Yes.
We hold all of that stuff in. So to your point, yes, you teach these trauma responses without even having experiencing the trauma. And so yeah, we've taught a lot. Taught.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm gonna flip this because we talked about, like this response in Black people and arguably other people of color, but culturally speaking, it shows up differently. Like I imagine in the Asian culture, that emotional range is suppressed for other cultural reasons. I can't speak to what that is, but I just, like just to articulate that in various cultures, it's like universal in the gender, like across cultures. It shows up for different reasons, but it's still the same conversation that men can't experience emotions other than anger is weak, that emotions don't belong in certain places, that we are not emotional beings. To express emotions leaves you vulnerable for manipulation. So I just wanted to name that. Like in our lived experience, there's a very particular reason why this would happen, right? And it shows up differently in both genders, but in other cultures, it shows up for different reasons, but the conversation's the same. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. It just goes to show worldwide, like there's this idea that men are supposed to hold it together. It's supposed to not be, and I think especially here where the idea in speaking about like not having it in the workplace, the idea is that if you are emotional, then you act a certain way. And the problem is that emotions don't make you do anything.
That's right.
Emotion don't make you do anything. I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, okay, I did that because I was angry. Because you you cussed this person out because you was angry, but if your boss would have did the same thing, you would have found a way to calm yourself down, and
That's
you
right.
would have been angry, but you would have found a way to do something different, right? So the emotion doesn't make you do anything. And I think that that's one of the flaws in the way we talk about it. It's like, oh, you're so emotional.
What does that even mean?
Right? What does that mean? And so once we start to articulate it in a better way, I like to look at emotions as energy that's in motion. So it's always moving, right? And so you're not going to be angry. I mean, listen, there's people that can go in and out and be angry for a long time.
Yeah,
But through that time, what you're going to find, even if you say, okay, so this person's been angry for 10 years, throughout that time, you're going to see times when they do have periods of happiness, where they do have periods of sadness, where there's fear that pops in. Like different emotions are always popping in.
that's right.
When you ignore that piece of yourself, then you're ignoring a piece of yourself. And so it's really hard to be your full self when you're ignoring a part of yourself. If that makes
That's
sense.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the context of energy and motion, right? And we are all like, we're all energy. Everything that's going in our body is energy. And, one of the things I like to say is emotions are data points and they are communications. They're like communication from our body that there's something to be tended to. So it fits really well. Like their energy and motion, that energy is communication to the brain. And then we have to learn how to put a label on that. Like when people do research, they do studies, they have to label certain things. And so we have to learn how to put labels on that. And then once we know what it is, and we say, name it to tame it, right? And once you know what it is, then you have a choice. And I love that you said, people are like, oh, my feeling, my anger made me do it. It's like you're not dragged, you're not being dragged along by your emotions. I mean, you may be, but you don't have to be. And I think that's the thing. People act like they don't have a choice in their response. They're just bound to their initial reaction. And then it's like a cop out to personal responsibility for the impact that has on another person. So I love what you said. I mean, energy flowing, and then that whole piece of choice.
Yeah. That's the whole thing, right? I say this often, but I heard this prayer once before that said, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, right? And it is like, well, I can't change other people. And sometimes I can't even change what they've done to me, but I am in control of how I respond. Now, my emotions, to your data points, that's exactly what they are. And oftentimes, like I'll say, like for me, I'm 45, right? And at this point in my life, it's really hard for you to trigger this 45-year-old version of me. Really hard. The 7-year-old version of me.
Speak.
That version can be triggered very well. And when it is triggered, again, that's a data point. It lets me know that, ooh, that's a spot that still needs some working.
Yes.
That spot hasn't been healed.
Yes.
And I think, quite frankly, that's what a lot of men that I've run into, they're afraid. They're afraid that when I start opening up, that I'm going to see all these wounds that haven't been healed, and I've been walking around like everything's fine. And really, I'm very scarred. And my thing to that is that, well, that may be true, but do you want to stay scarred? Because hurt people. And especially when you look at, lineage, if you got kids, if you got, nephews, or you got family members, like you're passing on that trauma response. And so it's like, do you want to stay there?
That's
and when
right.
it's that you don't want to stay there, then you get to the point to where you're willing to open up and look at these data points and say, ooh, ooh, that does scare me. Ooh, Well, why does that scare me?
Yeah.
Now that I recognize it, okay, how do I recalibrate? How do I get myself back to a place to where, okay, it does scare me, but I can do it, right? I'm good. I'm all right. I'm safe, right? I'm not 7.
That's right. That's right.
The context has changed. And now you can recover to the point to where you can move forward. I find that if you just do that in your head, then it works for some people, but for a lot of people that aren't, like, a lot of men are good with in the head. Like, they can do it logically, but in their body.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things come up. I love that. A couple of things come up. And one is I was thinking, and I wonder what you think about this. I think some men, and I speak to this because I think it's partially true for women too, some women too, is that they're afraid that if they open that can of worms, it'll incapacitate them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have time to indulge in that because the well is so deep that I may not recover. So I think that's a fear that doesn't get articulated a lot.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, it's like you're passing down trauma responses. And like I usually say, like if you're stuffing stuff, like you're stuffing a trash can, eventually that stuff's going to spill over. And it's going to spill over, and you have trash everywhere, and it's going to impact the people around you, and it's going to stink. And so it's like you gotta go in the well. You gotta empty that trash out. You gotta organize, or you're gonna be like a hoarder. You know? So like that came up for me as you were sharing about the fear, and so I just appreciate that articulation. There was something else that came up, but I forgot what it was because 51.
Well, I would like to piggyback on that because the thing is, it's going to come out. So to your point, stuff in the trash can, I like to ask the question to my guys, because a lot of people have heard this before, the straw that broke the camel's back. So the question is, a camel is an extremely strong animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that one straw can break a camel's back? And so when they start thinking about it, then they get to the point to where it's because of all of the other straws that were on there. And the point is, yes, everybody has a max, right? Everybody has a max, it's including the camel, even to the point to where you can be carrying so much because you are strong.
Yeah.
And I tell a lot of my guys, man, listen, your biggest weakness is your strength. I wish you were weaker because we got here a lot sooner, but you're so strong and you've been carrying stuff for so long that now all of a sudden it only takes one straw. It only takes one small little straw. Now all of a sudden a coworker looks at you sideways and you done had it. You're done. Or your child does something and then all of a sudden you go off the deep end. And it's like, it's going to come out one way or another. And so in order for you to better control it, the best thing to do is take out the trash every once in a while, right?
Yes. Take out the trash regularly.
Ideally, daily.
Yes, regularly, ideally.
Yeah.
And this brings me back, thank you, because your jumping in helped to re-trigger something that I was thinking, which is what you said, doing it in the head versus out loud, right? Like that piece of emptying the trash, or that piece of acknowledging emotions and going through that process, is often something that we want to do in our head because we want to keep it private. We want to keep it to ourselves. Yeah, we're doing the work, but we're doing the work over here in our little corner by ourselves. We're reading the books and we're meditating, but we're not saying it out loud. But the problem with that is that we have limited sight for ourselves. We have limited insight. It's not that we don't have insight, it's that we have blind spots. And so I think it's important to not only be in communities where you can do this, where you feel safe. And I think that is the other piece with men. It's like, because I would say there's such toxicity around this conversation, know who's safe and who's not safe. this conversation of emotional intelligence in men is not at its tipping point yet. So you don't know who you can talk to. And then it's even smaller if you're a Black man or a man of a certain culture, a man of color, right? So who is it that you talk to about that? So I think that's why what you're doing is so important, because it's important to have these conversations out loud and to be in communities where you don't feel alone in expressing what's truly going on, because it's in that, like we say, connection mitigates trauma, right? So it's in that connection that you begin to heal, right? It's in knowing that you're not alone that you begin to heal. So I love that you brought this point of like not doing it in the head, but doing this thing out loud with other people, with community, with a coach, with a therapist, with whomever that it needs to be done. And I think that, coming back to taking out the trash, when you have community, then you can do that regularly. You can actually have people with whom you can express with regularly. And that way the trash can doesn't have to get full. Maybe it's halfway full, but it doesn't have to get all the way full for you to then to go empty it. You don't have to feel this urgency like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But having like a regular check-in, a regular accountability partner. So I think again, this is why I was so drawn to connect and have this conversation, because I think I shared this with you. You're like a blue unicorn, in the space of this conversation.
Yeah, and earlier I mentioned teaching trauma responses, but guess what? We can teach healthy responses too, right? And so what you're talking about is a healthy environment. And unfortunately, I know for me, my father wasn't there, and so I deal with a lot of men who have been taught, to suppress things, who've been taught, but they haven't been in an environment where they've been healthy men to say, hey, these are healthy ways to deal with this, right? And so you're right. And listen, the community being able to take out the trash on a regular basis,
Yes.
listen, we got men, that aren't afraid to cry together, which to me is amazing, because it's like to get into a place to where you feel vulnerable as a man and to be able to let your guards down is because, it's kind of hard to do. And I understand when somebody says, I can't be emotional in the workplace, but that also tells me that we need to do better at talking about emotions in a more effective way.
Yes, let's go there for a minute. So in the workplace, right? How do you, because there's this culture. And so how do you help men in cultures where this conversation is so rampant? How do you help to dismantle that inside of leadership, inside of organizations, inside of these cultures? As much as you feel comfortable sharing, how do you sell this to leaders? Like, how do you be like, yeah, men, y'all need to be dismantling the emotional toxicity in here. That's my words, not yours.
I think the number one skill to have is communication. And so one of the things that they have to be able to do is, number one, understand how they feel. So going back to, I need to be able to recognize how I feel and recalibrate myself, and then see how do I communicate this? Because if you're doing something that makes me feel disrespected, it's not okay for me to keep allowing it to happen. But not okay for me to jump across the table. And so, but I do need to be able to recognize, and I think this is where a lot of men, this is where the conversation starts to go different ways, because it's like, well, I don't want to feel my emotions, so I just got to take it. And then another guy would be like, I ain't gonna take that. I'm coming across the table. I'm and it's like, whoa. No, we both need to acknowledge that this was disrespectful, but there's a way to do it, right? There's a way for me to be able to communicate in an effective way. So I need to be able to sit back, recognize, shoot, this hit a spot in me. Okay, this is starting to make me feel a certain way. Let me recognize that. Okay, let me say, okay, whew, I'm getting triggered. Let me do what I need to do so I can recalibrate. And there's there's some physical skills that we do to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then say, okay, how do I address this? How do I combat this? How do I come back and say, it's not okay for you to say that to me in that way? Or maybe we need to have a conversation after the meeting, or, but how do I address that in a way to where I'm not ignoring my feelings, but I'm also not making the whole environment toxic?
Yes.
And so, and I know for me, like, that's a healthy place to be. Like, if I do something to make somebody feel disrespected, I feel like it's not a healthy place if they can't say to me, hey, Jarrod, that didn't feel good. I want that type of environment, because one of the things that I pride myself on is that I find a lot of people in the field know things theoretically, but don't practice it.
Yes.
And so I do my best to practice what I preach. So if I do something that makes somebody feel I want them to be able to have the safe space to communicate. And that also means me taking responsibility.
Yes.
Me being able to say, oh, okay, yeah, but I can't take responsibility for how you feel.
Right. Correct.
But I can take responsibility for things that I said. Maybe I could have said it better. Maybe there was a different place for me to say it. Maybe I shouldn't have said it in that environment, right? So there's certain things that I can get better. But I mean, stepping back, realizing that, okay, shoot, this does make me feel a certain way. I need to settle down, recalibrate, and then I need to learn the skill of communication. How do I communicate this in an effective way, right? Instead of coming across the table.
Yes. I think you said something so key, and that is like, once you recognize and then, like, recalibrate, regulate those emotions in the moment, and then, sort of decide what you need to do. Like, you need to step away and cool down. You need to, like, meeting after the meeting. Is it something that you feel like you need to say in the moment? One of the things that I have found, and you tell me if you find this similar. One of the things that I have found is that people don't know how, they don't even have the language to start a conversation like that, especially when they're feeling an emotion. It's like if they say something, it's going to come out the wrong way at the wrong time, and so, like, then they're either you know taking it and just, like, going off and maybe blowing off some steam some other way, or they've taken it so much that they go across the table. So, is that something that you find as well, that, like,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily know how to start the conversation or what the language is to use?
Yes, they don't know how to start the conversation. And to your point, they wait too long.
Yes, yes.
It becomes that proverbial straw, right? I've been taking these straws for days and weeks and months, and now finally I'm fed up and I'm tired of all this. And now
That's right.
they let all of it out. And so even if they did know how to communicate it, they're not effective at that moment, right?
That's right.
So yeah, I think it's both things. Number one, they wait too long, but number two,
Mhm.
one of the reasons why they wait too long is because they don't know how to communicate it in an effective way, without being disrespectful, without being ridiculed, without being um, put down for even having those feelings.
Yeah.
And so it's yeah. So I think it's both. I think it's waiting too long and
Yeah.
not the means to communicate.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. So I feel like we could probably have this conversation for the next 2 hours. We might even have a part two. Like, we might need to come back and do, because what I think that one good thing we could potentially talk about in the future really is, like, what are the ways that to effectively communicate emotions.
Yes.
I think that would be a great topic, because I think that is where there is such difficulty. And I think that is both in the professional world, in the organizational world. I think that actually is across genders. So I think that's a conversation. So we gonna schedule that. We're gonna schedule that, because I think that might be a part two. But I think this has been just an amazing wealth of knowledge and tools. I thank you for being my conversational partner today, because I know that the listeners are going to really get so much out of this, whether they are the man listening or whether they are the partner or the colleague listening. And so I want to encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast and you are, or you know someone that this would be beneficial, that you share this episode, come back to it, share this episode with a leader, with a family member, with a colleague, with a friend, because this is the conversation that we need to put out there. We need to be dismantling some of these myths, some of these fears, and especially in our communities of color, and particularly in the Black community. I think this is so important because it's a matter of generational healing. It is a matter of generational healing. So, Jarrod, thank you so much for being here. I want the listeners to know, like, if they want to reach out to you, if you're a leader in an organization and they want to reach out to you for coaching or for consulting or for speaking, how can they find you?
Yeah, well, the best place to go is centeredexperience.com. All that information there. They can reach out to me for workshops, for coaching. We do corporate trainings, all of that stuff. And yeah, and we're getting up a podcast pretty soon. So yeah, all of that.
Yay.
Yes. So I'm gonna be needing you in there.
Hey.
Yes.
Awesome. So thecenteredexperience.com, go check him out. And where did you say on social media they can follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the best place. I'm not on, the Facebook and all of that other stuff. I believe I'm on there, but I'm active on LinkedIn.
Yes, LinkedIn is where I live too. Everybody who follows me knows. I mean, I'm on Instagram, but I'm not really on Instagram. LinkedIn is the home. So yes, find Jarrod on LinkedIn. Find him at thecenteredexperience.com. And remember, go and share this episode with someone who could benefit. And please leave a review, because we really want people who are searching for conversations like this to know that these are the valuable conversations that are happening. And when you leave a review, you help the algorithms in the podcast platforms to serve us up to the people who are looking for these conversations. So with that, thank you again, Jarrod, for being with us today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. This was amazing. Thank you.
Oh, such a pleasure. And to the listeners, without you, there is no podcast. So as always, thank you. And until the next time we see each other, stay empowered.